I didn't hear the knock at first, just the faint scrape of paper sliding under my door. When I bent down to pick it up, I saw my name written in a hand I'd never seen before, thin, looping letters that seemed almost too deliberate, as if each stroke had been drawn slowly, carefully. The paper smelled faintly of damp earth. Inside was a single sheet. No return address, no signature, just a few lines that made my hands go cold. Come to Hollow Creek. Your mother's bloodline is not what you think. I can tell you the truth about the tragedy they buried. I read it 3 times, each time feeling my chest tighten a little more. My mother never spoke about her childhood. If I ever asked, her face would go still, her eyes unfocused, as if she was looking at something far away. She died 2 years ago, taking her secrets with her. I should have thrown the letter away. I should have laughed at it, or called it what it probably was, a prank. But there was something in those words that felt like a hook under my skin, pulling me forward. I searched for Hollow Creek. The maps barely acknowledged it, a thin line of road dissolving into marshland somewhere in Missouri. No hotels, no gas stations, just a name and a cluster of weathered buildings hidden by swamp. The night before I left, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing a soft rustle outside my window, like someone shifting in the dark. When I looked, there was nothing but the still outline of the trees, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, waiting. The drive took 2 days. The further I went, the quieter the world became. Gas stations stopped appearing. The pavement turned to gravel, then to packed dirt. The trees grew so thick they swallowed the road in shadow, even though the sun was still up. When I finally saw the crooked wooden sign, Hollow Creek, Est, 1827, I felt a strange weight in my chest, like my body knew before my mind did that I had made a mistake. The air here was different, heavy. Every breath tasted faintly of stagnant water. I parked outside a sagging old farmhouse, the one described in the letter's postscript. My hand trembled as I reached for the door. That was when I realized the door was already open. The first thing I noticed wasn't the house. It was the smell. That thick, wet stench of stagnant water, like rotting leaves, and something else, something faintly sweet, like decay that had settled into the earth years ago and refused to leave. The air clung to my skin, heavy and damp, as I stepped out of the car. The farmhouse sat crooked at the edge of the mire, its wood darkened and warped by years of moisture. The shutters hung at odd angles, one banging softly against the siding with each lazy push of the wind. Every window was cloudy, as though the glass itself had grown cataracts. I stood there for a moment staring at it, the quiet pressing against my ears. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind that makes you strain to hear something, anything just to break it. But there was nothing. No frogs. No insects. No birds. The front steps groaned when I put my weight on them, the sound loud enough to make me freeze. I half expected something inside to answer. The door stuck, then gave way with a sigh, like it had been holding its breath. The air inside was cooler, stale. My first step stirred a fine layer of dust that caught the light in drifting patterns. There was a smell here too, old wood, mildew, and something faintly metallic, almost like rust. The floorboards complained under me as I walked. The wallpaper had peeled in long curling strips, exposing the bare wood beneath. In the corner of the room, a rocking chair faced the wall. It moved slightly, just enough to make me wonder if it was the wind. Then I heard it. A sound so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it, high-pitched, faint, like laughter, a child's. It came from above. I tilted my head back, staring at the ceiling, my pulse hammering in my throat. The sound faded as quickly as it came, leaving only that heavy silence again. But it was different now. The air felt charged, aware as if the house had noticed me. I told myself it was just the wind or the shifting of old boards, but my skin prickled, and deep down I knew. This place wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. People say small towns are friendly. Hollow Creek isn't. The streets felt like they were holding their breath. Shops were open, doors propped wide, but the moment I stepped inside one, the air shifted. Conversations dropped to whispers. People kept their heads down, their eyes on the floor or the shelves, never on me. I started at the town clerk's office, thinking it'd be easy, just a few dusty books, maybe some handwritten records from the 1800s. But when I asked about the three brothers, the man behind the counter stiffened, like I'd just cursed. He flipped through the leather-bound ledger without really looking at it, then shut it hard and pushed it away, said there was nothing here for me. That was the pattern everywhere I went. The barber, the feed store, the diner. The moment I mentioned the year 1832 or the brothers, their mouths tightened and their eyes slid away. Finally, I found her. She was sitting on the porch of a sagging house near the edge of town, shelling peas into a metal bowl. Her hands were thin, knotted with age, and she didn't look up when I approached. I asked if she knew about the brothers. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, in a voice that rasped like dry leaves, "You, sir, not from here. That's why you, sir'd still asking." I told her I'd come looking for family history, that I thought my mother's side might be connected somehow. She froze, one pea rolling from her palm to the porch boards. "You need to leave," she said, "before the bloodless ones hear your name." The words caught me off guard. I asked what she meant. She shook her head, her eyes sharp and wet. "They don't keep birth records here," she whispered, "or death records. Not for them. Not for what they were." Her gaze flicked to the road behind me, like she was expecting someone or something to appear. Then she leaned in, her breath smelling faintly of tobacco and something bitter. "If you stay past nightfall, you'll see. And once you see, they'll know you." A wind picked up then, carrying the scent of the marsh from beyond the town. She turned her face away from me and wouldn't speak again. I walked back toward the center of Hollow Creek, her words looping in my head. Not for what they were. It was the first time I wondered if the thing I'd come here to find might already be looking for me. People say small towns are friendly. Hollow Creek isn't. The streets felt like they were holding their breath. Shops were open, doors propped wide, but the moment I stepped inside one, the air shifted. Conversations dropped to whispers. People kept their heads down, their eyes on the floor or the shelves, never on me. I started at the town clerk's office, thinking it'd be easy, just a few dusty books, maybe some handwritten records from the 1800s, but when I asked about the three brothers, the man behind the counter stiffened like I'd just cursed. He flipped through the leather-bound ledger without really looking at it, then shut it hard and pushed it away, said there was nothing here for me. That was the pattern everywhere I went. The barber, the feed store, the diner. The moment I mentioned the year 1832 or the brothers, their mouths tightened and their eyes slid away. Finally, I found her. She was sitting on the porch of a sagging house near the edge of town, shelling peas into a metal bowl. Her hands were thin, knotted with age, and she didn't look up when I approached. I asked if she knew about the brothers. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, in a voice that rasped like dry leaves, "You suffer not from here. That's why you suffer still asking." I told her I'd come looking for family history, that I thought my mother's side might be connected somehow. She froze, one pea rolling from her palm to the porch boards. "You need to leave," she said, "before the bloodless ones hear your name." The words caught me off guard. I asked what she meant. She shook her head, her eyes sharp and wet. "They don't keep birth records here," she whispered, "or death records. Not for them. Not for what they were." Her gaze flicked to the road behind me, like she was expecting someone or something to appear. Then she leaned in, her breath smelling faintly of tobacco and something bitter. "If you stay past nightfall, you shall see, and once you see, they shall know you." A wind picked up then, carrying the scent of the marsh from beyond the town. She turned her face away from me and wouldn't speak again. I walked back toward the center of Hollow Creek, her words looping in my head. Not for what they were. It was the first time I wondered if the thing I'd come here to find might already be looking for me. I almost didn't see the loose board. It was tucked in the far corner of the bedroom, the wood just slightly warped, like it had been pried up and set back down more than once. When I lifted it, the smell hit me first, a faint stale rot, like paper left too long in a damp place. Beneath the floor was a small iron chest, the lock rusted but still holding. It took me 20 minutes and a screwdriver to force it open. Inside, wrapped in a yellowed quilt, was a journal. The leather cover was cracked, the pages brittle at the edges. My grandmother's name was written inside, in a slanted, hurried hand. The first few entries were ordinary. Weather, chores, notes about the farm. But then, she began writing about her brothers. She said they were all born the same night in 1832. 3 of them, and none of them cried, not once. She wrote how the midwife fainted when she touched them, and how her mother swore the babies were breathing, yet no one could feel a heartbeat. Grandmother described them in such strange detail, skin soft as wax, bodies that sagged when held, like sacks of water, no bones to give them shape, no warmth in their flesh, and their eyes, she said they were large and glassy, always wet, never blinking, never closing, even when they slept. She claimed they grew, slowly, but not like other children. They didn't speak, only watched. Sometimes, she said, they would stand together in the doorway at night, their faces pale and round in the moonlight, their eyes catching the light like mirrors. The last entry about them chilled me. She wrote, "I think they know they're not like us. I think they know we fear them." Her handwriting grew shaky then, the words less steady. I have seen them whisper to one another without moving their lips. I have seen them look at me as if they are waiting for something to happen. I dream they are still infants, lying in the crib, but when I reach in, their eyes follow me until I can't move. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. The floor beneath me felt colder than it had before, as if something was pressing up from underneath. That was when I realized the quilt that had wrapped the journal wasn't just a blanket, it was small, too small, and it was shaped like it had once wrapped around something the size of a child. I wasn't set looking for it. The photograph was tucked between 2 pages of my grandmother's journal, pressed flat as if someone had tried to hide it there. The edges were sharp, the surface silvery and dark. It was a daguerreotype, the kind made before real photographs were common. 3 children stood in a grassy field, their clothes plain and old-fashioned. Their faces were pale, almost grey, with mouths that hung slightly open as if they had forgotten to close them. What struck me first were their limbs bent in odd angles that didn't look like the way bone should allow a body to move. Their eyes were wrong. Even in the frozen stillness of the image, they seemed wet, as though reflecting something behind me. I studied the background, squinting at the blurred tree line. That's when I saw it. A figure stood just behind the children, half hidden in the tall grass. Taller than any man I'd ever seen, its outline smudged by the limits of the photograph, but still unmistakable. Too narrow at the waist, too long in the arms. No face, just a dark mass where the head should be. I flipped back through the journal, checking the entries about the brothers. There was no mention of anyone else in the field, no description of a figure like that. My hands felt cold, and the air in the room seemed heavier, like the pressure had changed. I set the photograph on the table, but every time I looked away, I had the unnerving sense it was no longer the same. The children's faces seemed more forward, their heads tilted in a way I didn't remember. At one point, I could have sworn the tallest one's arm had shifted just slightly, the bent joint folding closer to its chest. That night, I dreamed of the field. I stood exactly where the picture had been taken. The children were there, motionless, but the grass moved as though something was walking toward me. I woke with my heart pounding, the photograph still sitting on the table beside my bed. Only, the shadowy figure in the background wasn't blurry anymore. It was closer, and its head, if you could call it that, was turned directly toward me. The tavern was dim and smelled of sour beer and damp wood. I had been sitting alone in the corner when a man dropped heavily into the seat across from me. His eyes were bloodshot, his beard patchy, and his breath sharp with liquor. "You seer asking about them," he slurred, wagging a finger at me. "The brothers." I didn't answer, but he kept talking. "They never aged just like you or me, never grew the way a child should. Their skin stayed pale, their eyes glassy, and when they were cut, there was no blood, just this clear fluid, like water from the marsh." His words settled over me, heavy and wrong. "They made no sound when they walked," he went on, leaning closer. "Not on wood, not on stone, not even on dry leaves. People said they were the last gift of the mire, a curse, or maybe a bargain someone made long before we were born." The fire in the hearth popped, and for a moment I thought I heard something faint beneath the crackle, a soft dragging sound, like wet cloth moving over the floorboards. "What does that mean?" I asked him. The man's eyes darted to the door, then to the dark windows. "Means they weren't meant to stay. Said when their purpose was done, the mire would call them back, swallow them whole." I wanted to laugh it off, but his voice carried a strange certainty, as if he'd seen something he wished he hadn't. "You best leave," he said suddenly, his tone sharp, "before they hear your name." He stood and staggered toward the bar, muttering under his breath. I caught fragments, something about a night without moonlight, about 3 shapes standing in the water, waiting. I sat there for a long time after he left, listening to the low hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, the shuffle of boots on the floor. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere outside, just beyond the tavern's light, something was standing in the dark, and it knew exactly who I was. I woke to a sound so soft, I almost thought I'd dreamed it. A knock, 3 quick taps, like fingertips on wood. The room was dark, the kind of black where the corners seem to swell and move if you look too long. My breath felt thick in my chest as I pushed back the blanket. The floor was cold under my feet, colder than it should have been for late summer. I opened the door. No one stood there. The hallway stretched out, silent. But when I looked down, my stomach knotted. 3 pale, wet footprints led from the front door all the way to my bed. They were small, child-sized, with toes pressed deep into the wood, as if whoever made them was heavier than they should be. I stepped out, my bare toes brushing the damp marks. The smell hit me then, a sour, earthy stench, thick with the scent of stagnant water. It clung to the back of my throat. My eyes followed the trail back toward the open window at the far end of the hall. Beyond it, I could just make out the dark shimmer of the marsh. A chill rippled through me. I shut the door and leaned against it, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I felt it. The air in the room dropped in temperature, so fast it stole the warmth from my skin. My breath came out in a faint white cloud, hanging in the air. And then, breathing. It wasn't mine. It came slow and damp, just behind my ear, so close I could almost feel lips against my skin. I spun around, heart pounding. No one was there. The shadows in the corners stayed still, but I couldn't shake the sense that they were watching me. The wet smell grew stronger. I backed toward the bed, my eyes locked on the doorway. The footprints had begun to fade, as if they were sinking into the floorboards, swallowed by the wood itself. By the time they were gone, the breathing had stopped. The room was silent again. But even now, I can't convince myself I was alone. The ledger was heavier than I expected, its leather cover cracked and dry, smelling faintly of dust and something sweet that had long since turned sour. The ink on the spine had faded to nothing, but inside the handwriting was small, neat, and almost painfully precise. The first entries were ordinary births, fevers, broken bones, but halfway through, the tone shifted. He wrote about the brothers. The doctor described how they were brought to him, pale as candle wax, their eyes wide but unfocused. He tried to examine them, but the moment his hands touched their skin, their limbs gave way, not like breaking, not like injury, just collapsing, folding in on themselves as though the bones inside had vanished. He couldn't find a pulse. When he pricked their skin, the needle came back dry. No blood, not even a bead. He wrote that they didn't cry or speak, that their mouths opened but no sound came. Then there was a strange line, underlined twice. When prayers were spoken, they shrank from me. He claimed their faces twisted, their necks pulling in like something recoiling from a flame. Page after page, the words grew more frantic. He wrote of trying to cut a lock of hair, only to have the scissors snap. He claimed their eyes never blinked unless he looked away, and when he looked back, the pupils had shifted, larger, smaller, as if reacting to something unseen. Near the end, the ink began to blot, the handwriting uneven. The last dated entry described a final visit. He didn't say who brought them, just that it was night, and the brothers stood at the edge of his lantern light, still as statues. He stepped toward them, calling out, but the flame in his lamp flickered violently. The shadows lengthened in ways that made no sense. The last line, written in a trembling hand, read, "They are not of us." No explanation, no signature. I closed the ledger, my hands slick with sweat, despite the cool air in the archive. The quiet pressed in on me, so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. And then, from somewhere deep in the rows of shelves, I heard the faintest sound. Not footsteps exactly, but the soft drag of something moving across the floor, slow and wet. I left the ledger where it was. I didn't want to turn around. She leaned across the table, her voice dropping so low I had to lean in to hear. The firelight in the small room threw shadows up the walls, and her eyes seemed to vanish in the flicker. She told me the story, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to ask. It began over 100 years ago, when Hollow Creek was still clear enough to see the stones at the bottom. There was a man who lived by its bend, a quiet man, but something in him snapped the night his wife died. They say grief can twist a soul, but it rotted. One night, he took his 3 children to the water's edge. No one knows if they struggled. No one knows if they struggled. No one heard them cry. But the next morning, the creek ran red, thick and slow. She said it stayed that way for 3 days. The town whispered that the earth itself drank the blood, and that the mire at the far edge of the creek began to stir, as if something inside had woken. The man was found sitting in the shallows, his eyes wide and empty. When they pulled him out, his body was cold, but his lips moved. No one could make out the words, but the people swore they heard them in their dreams later, soft, wet syllables that clung to their minds like mud. The old woman's voice shook as she told me that the mire kept the man's grief, held it like a seed, and that grief began to grow. It took root in the water, fed on the silence and sorrow of the place, until it birthed something that should never have walked the earth. The first children of the mire. 3 boys. No one knew who they belonged to or when they first appeared, but they were always seen together, their skin pale as ash, their movements too smooth, their faces almost human but not quite. She swore they were the grief made flesh, bound to serve whatever had risen in the swamp. I tried to laugh, to push it away as an old story meant to scare strangers, but when she gripped my wrist, her fingers were ice. "They come when the creek runs red again," she whispered. The fire popped, and I flinched. In the corner of the room, a drop of water slid from the ceiling, hitting the floor with a sound far too loud for such a small thing. The first thing I noticed was how still the world felt. No crickets, no wind, no distant call of night birds, just the heavy, wet air pressing against my skin. I had walked this path near the marsh before, but tonight the air felt different, almost alive. It clung to me, thick and warm, as if it were breathing against my face. At first I thought it was my imagination, the way the air seemed to swell and sink, like a slow inhale followed by a long, patient exhale. But then I saw it, the faint ripple across the water, perfectly in time with the rise and fall of the air. The marsh was breathing. The surface shifted in strange patterns, shapes just beneath, moving in slow, deliberate circles. They weren't fish, they weren't anything I'd ever seen before. Every so often, one would glide just close enough to break the surface, but never enough for me to see it clearly. I caught glimpses of pale curves, glistening skin that seemed to stretch and vanish in an instant. Then came the whispers. They were faint at first, like water sliding over stones, but the longer I stood there, the clearer they became. The words didn't belong to any language I knew, yet somehow they pressed into my mind, carrying meaning without sound. I felt them deep in my chest, as if the marsh was speaking directly into me. The air grew warmer with each breath it took, the smell of rot and wet earth filling my nose until I could almost taste it. My heartbeat slowed, matching the rhythm of that inhale and exhale. For a moment, I thought about stepping closer, about leaning in to see what was speaking to me. Something moved just beneath the water, right at my feet. The whispers sharpened, quickened, and for a second I swore I saw a face under the surface, eyes wide and unblinking, mouth opening in perfect silence. The sight made my stomach twist, yet I couldn't move. Then, without warning, the water stilled, the breath stopped. The air went cold so fast I shivered. The marsh fell silent, as if it had closed its eyes again, retreating into some deep, slow sleep. I took a step back, finally able to move, but the echo of those whispers clung to me. They weren't fading. They were following. I woke to a sharp sting in my hand, the kind of pain that cut straight through sleep. My heart was already pounding before my eyes even opened. When I finally looked, I saw the sheets, dark, wet, clinging to my fingers. My hand was bleeding, a deep, ugly gash running across my palm. I couldn't remember how it happened. The wound burned, not like a normal cut, but with a strange heat that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The metallic smell of blood filled the room, thick and heavy, and I could feel it soaking deeper into the fabric beneath me. That's when I saw them. In the far corner of my room, where the shadows pooled deepest, 3 small figures stood perfectly still. Their skin caught the faint light from the moon through my window, smooth and pale, like something wet pulled from the earth. I couldn't make out their faces, but I felt their eyes on me, locked and unblinking. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The smallest one tilted its head, slow and deliberate, as if studying me. Then, almost in unison, they all took a single step forward. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The burning in my hand flared sharper now, and I realized something. My blood was dripping from their fingers. It wasn't possible. I was awake. I was watching it happen. One of them raised its hand, palm up, and I could see the crimson glisten in the moonlight. My blood, the same rhythm of my heartbeat, seemed to echo in their movements, like we were somehow connected. I blinked hard, just for a second, and when my eyes opened, the corner was empty. The shadows looked ordinary again. But the sheets were still wet, the wound still burned, and when I reached for the lamp, I saw it, a faint, smudged print of a small hand pressed into the blood on my palm. It wasn't mine. He found me outside the church after the evening bell, leaning on his cane like the weight of his words was already on his shoulders. The air was cool, but his face glistened with sweat. He said my name quietly, like he was afraid someone else might hear, and motioned for me to follow him to the side of the building where the shadows were thicker. The preacher's voice was low, shaky, but every word was sharp enough to cut. He told me my grandmother had gone to the marsh once, long before I was born. Her children were sick, burning with fever, their small bodies wasting away while the doctor shook his head. She was desperate. And the marsh, he said, listens to desperation. He claimed she stood at the water's edge in the dead of night and called out, not to God, but to something older, something that lives in the dark silt beneath the water. She promised it what she could not name in return for her children's lives, and it answered. The preacher's eyes darted to the ground as he told me the bargain worked, but not in the way she'd hoped. The brothers were born of her body, but they were not of this world. They breathed air, but it wasn't the same air we breathed. Their blood didn't flow like ours. They were hers in name only, bound instead to the thing that had answered her call. I told him I didn't believe in fairy tales. His hand shot out, gripping my arm so tight I felt his nails dig in. He said the debt was never paid, and debts like that don't just disappear. They wait. They follow the bloodline. The shadows around us felt heavier then, pressing closer. The preacher's gaze flicked to the marsh in the distance, where the last sliver of daylight was fading. He whispered that the thing in the water never forgets, and it will come to collect in its own time. I started to walk away, telling myself he was just a bitter old man with too many ghost stories. But his final words caught in my mind. Like a hook, he said the marsh marked me the day I was born, and no matter where I go, it already knows the taste of my blood. The spade hit something solid. At first I thought it was just another stone buried in the damp cellar floor, but when I knelt down and scraped the dirt away, my fingers touched cold metal. It was a small box, rusted at the edges, no bigger than a loaf of bread. My pulse quickened as I pried it open, the hinges groaning like they hadn't been touched in decades. Inside, there was no gold or keepsakes, just teeth, dozens of them. They weren't human. Each was long and thin, like needles carved from ivory, their tips so fine they could pierce skin with the lightest touch. They were all the same length, all perfectly straight, and they lay in the box in neat rows, like someone had been keeping them in order. Beneath them was a folded scrap of paper. The handwriting stopped my breath. I'd seen it before, in the margins of old recipes, in notes tucked between the pages of my grandmother's Bible. Her hand, small and deliberate. The words were short, almost hurried. If they come for you, give them these. The cellar air felt heavier. Damp earth clung to my skin, and the faint smell of rot rose from the shadows around me. I couldn't stop staring at the teeth. They didn't belong to any animal I knew. They looked like they had grown for only one purpose: piercing, draining. I touched one, and a strange shiver crawled up my spine. Questions tumbled in my head. Who were they? Why would these teeth matter to them? And why had my grandmother hidden them so carefully beneath the house? A faint sound made me look up. It wasn't the creak of the old beams or the wind outside. It was softer, more deliberate, like someone dragging their fingers across the dirt wall. I stayed still, clutching the box to my chest, listening. The sound stopped, but the air felt charged, as if something was waiting for me to move. I shut the box, the click of the latch echoing in the cramped cellar. The teeth shifted inside, making a faint, dry rattle. It almost sounded like breathing. When I finally climbed back up to the kitchen, I locked the trapdoor and set the box on the table. The note stared back at me, the words burning into my mind. I don't know who they are, but tonight, I think they already know I've found their teeth. It was near midnight when I first heard it. A thin, trembling melody floating through the still air, so soft I almost thought I imagined it. But as I sat up in bed, the sound became clearer. A lullaby, slow and low, like someone was rocking a child to sleep. My chest tightened because I knew that song. My mother used to hum it to me when I was small, long before she died. I crept to the window. The night was thick with fog, but the sound seemed to drift from the marsh beyond the fields. Every note pulled at me, gentle but insistent, as if it were meant only for me to hear. My bare feet touched the cold floor, and before I realized it, I was outside, the damp grass soaking the hem of my nightshirt. The closer I got, the stronger the smell of the marsh became, that mix of stagnant water and something faintly sweet, like flowers long past bloom. The lullaby never wavered, winding through the cattails like a thread I couldn't help but follow. The moon was pale, barely more than a smudge in the sky, but enough to show movement on the water's surface. At first I thought it was the wind rippling the reeds. Then I saw them. Hands. Pale, thin hands rising from the black water, their skin almost glowing in the moonlight. Long fingers swayed in rhythm with the song, beckoning me closer. They weren't frantic or threatening. They moved slowly, almost tenderly, as if they were offering comfort. I stood frozen at the water's edge, the mud soft beneath my toes. The lullaby wrapped around me, tugging at old memories, the kind that made my throat ache. I could almost hear my mother's voice layered over the one coming from the marsh. One hand lifted higher than the rest, palm open, waiting. Something in me wanted to reach out, to touch it, to believe that somehow my mother was there. But just as I leaned forward, the song faltered, the notes stretched, cracked, and then dropped into an unfamiliar pattern, something darker, sharper, like the voice no longer cared to soothe. The hand slipped back under the water, one by one, without a ripple. The marsh went silent. I didn't realize until then that I was standing ankle-deep in the water, and somewhere below, in the cold darkness, something brushed against my foot. It happened so fast that most of us didn't notice at first. One moment, the sun was pouring down over the fields, the air thick with summer heat. The next, the light dimmed, like someone had laid a veil over the sky. I looked up, expecting clouds, but it wasn't clouds. It was a solid, suffocating gray, smooth as stone, stretching from horizon to horizon. The air shifted. It wasn't cooler or warmer, just heavier, pressing against my skin in a way that made my breath feel shallow. I heard the shopkeeper across the street slam his door, the sound sharp in the stillness. Then another door, then another. Someone whispered, "They're coming," and the words seemed to ripple through the street like a gust of wind. Birds, dozens of them, had been perched on the telephone wires that morning. Now the wires were empty. The silence was so deep it felt wrong, like the world was holding its breath. Even the crickets had gone quiet. I tasted it then, the air bitter and metallic, coating the back of my tongue. It was the same taste I remembered from biting my lip too hard, the copper tang of blood. Mrs. Harlan shuffled past me, clutching her grandson Seth's hand, her eyes darting upward. "Get inside," she murmured without looking at me. "Lock the door." I should have listened, but something in me wanted to see what everyone else was hiding from. I stepped into the middle of the street. The gray sky seemed lower now, as if it was sinking toward the earth. Somewhere beyond the hills, I heard a deep rolling sound, not thunder. Thunder doesn't rise and fall like breathing. I glanced at the windows around me. Faces peeked through curtains, pale and wide-eyed. A hand, bony and trembling, pulled one shut the moment I met their gaze. The sound came again, closer this time. The air seemed to vibrate with it, rattling in my chest. I turned to go back inside, but the street felt longer than it should have, my feet dragging like the air itself was holding me in place. Then I saw it, not in the sky, but in the far field beyond the fence line. A ripple, like heat above a road, bending the light in slow, deliberate waves. The gray pressed lower, dimming the last trace of the sun. And I swear, in that strange, muted light, something in the field. It started with a knock that didn't sound right. Too slow, too heavy. Each thud seemed to sink into the walls, rattling the glass in the window panes. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, my heart pounding, listening. The knock came again, and I knew before I even touched the door who it would be. When I opened it, they were there, the brothers. They were taller now, impossibly so. Their shoulders brushed the top of the frame, and their limbs looked stretched, as if someone had pulled them too far. Their faces hadn't changed, though. Still smooth, still blank, skin pale as milk. No lines, no pores, no sign of age, just emptiness where expressions should be. They didn't speak, they just stood there, and yet their presence pressed into the room like an unseen weight. My ears popped, my knees wobbled. It was like the air itself had turned thick and heavy, trying to push me down to the floor. I couldn't breathe right. Every inhale felt like dragging something sharp into my lungs. The smell was wrong too. Faint, but there, like damp earth and iron, the way the air smells right after lightning strikes. One of them stepped forward. I didn't hear the movement, but I felt it, the shift in the air, the way the walls seemed to lean closer. My lamp flickered. Their eyes, if you could call them that, caught the light in a strange way, not reflecting it, but swallowing it, making the space around them dimmer. I wanted to ask what they wanted, why they had come back, but my tongue felt stuck, heavy in my mouth. The taller one tilted his head, just slightly, like he was studying me. Then the other did the same, mirroring him perfectly. My skin crawled. Without speaking, they stepped past me, into the room. I tried to move out of the way, but the pressure around me grew so strong it was like wading through deep water. They didn't look at the furniture, or the photographs, or the flickering lamp. They just stood in the center of the room, side by side, still watching me. The silence stretched until it was unbearable. Then, together, they turned toward the back door. And that's when I noticed it was already open. The journal pages are brittle now, edges curling like dried leaves. I turn each one slowly, afraid they might crumble in my hands. The handwriting changes in places, rushed, uneven, almost frantic. It speaks of the pact again, the one I thought I understood. But the truth is worse than I imagined. It can only be broken one way. The brothers must be returned to the mire willingly, and not just by anyone. It has to be someone of their blood. That means me. I sit there staring at the words, my pulse loud in my ears. The candle beside me gutters, throwing shadows across the page like grasping fingers. The thought of going back to that place, to the black water and the sucking mud, makes my stomach twist. I remember the smell, rotting vegetation mixed with something sweet and wrong, like fruit left too long in the sun. The journals don't explain what will happen if I succeed. They also don't say what happens if I fail, but every instinct tells me the brothers won't just fade away. If I don't send them back, they'll keep growing stronger, and whatever they've been waiting for, it'll happen. My hands are trembling as I trace the ink. Somewhere in the house, the wood creaks, slow and deliberate, like footsteps trying not to be heard. I freeze. When I finally gather the courage to look up, the doorway is empty. Still, the air feels heavier, as if they're near, listening. I think about the mire, the stagnant surface that hides what's beneath, the way the water closes around anything that dares step in. I wonder if they remember it, if they long for it, or if they'll fight me when the time comes. The idea of guiding them there willingly makes my chest tighten. They're fast, stronger than they should be, and I don't know if I can trick them, but blood calls to blood. Maybe they'll follow without question. A page near the back has a single line scrawled so hard, the pen nearly tore through the paper. They will know you are leading them. I close the journal, my fingers numb. From somewhere outside, down the hill toward the marsh, I hear it again. That low, wet sound like something heavy moving through water. And it sets, coming closer. It started with small things I barely noticed. My hands shook when I lit the candle at night. My breath came shorter after climbing the stairs. I told myself it was just the cold or the stress. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Each morning, my reflection looked a little less like me. My skin was pale enough to catch the candlelight, almost translucent in places. The veins in my wrists used to stand out blue and clear, but now they're fading, disappearing beneath the surface, like they're retreating. There's a hollow feeling in my chest, not just from weakness, but from something pulling at me, tugging me toward the marsh. The thought used to fill me with dread. Now it stirs something else, a hunger. I dream about it every night. The still black water, the smell of wet moss, the soft sound of bubbles breaking the surface. I wake up with my lips dry, tasting the air like I'm searching for that damp, earthy scent. Sometimes I catch it faintly, even here in the house, and my stomach twists with craving. My clothes hang looser. My footsteps sound lighter, almost too light, like my bones aren't carrying me the same way anymore. I press my hands to my ribs and feel less, as if there's space where there shouldn't be. I don't tell anyone. Not that there's anyone left to tell. The neighbors don't come near the house anymore. I see them from the window sometimes, hurrying past with their eyes fixed straight ahead. Tonight, while washing my face, I leaned close to the mirror and stared. My eyes are darker somehow, the whites dulled, and when I smiled, testing myself, testing the shape of my own expression, it didn't look right. The corners didn't pull the same way. It hit me then, sudden and cold, that maybe this is how it starts for them. Maybe they weren't always like that. Maybe they felt this same pull, the same sick yearning for the mire, until there was nothing human left to resist it. The candle burned low, and I caught my reflection moving in the glass a fraction slower than I did. My stomach dropped. Outside, the wind carried a faint, wet sound, almost like a voice. It was coming from the direction of the marsh, and for the first time, I wanted to answer it. The night is so still, it feels like the world is holding its breath. The moon above is pale, drained of all warmth, and yet the marsh below it glows faintly, as if it's lit from somewhere deep beneath the surface. I should be in bed, but something pulls me to the window, something that makes my chest tighten and my feet move without thinking. When I step outside, the air is cool and damp, clinging to my skin like mist. Each breath carries the scent of wet moss and stagnant water, and with it comes a sound so soft, I almost think I'm imagining it. It's Sep's her voice. My grandmother Sep's voice. She's been gone for years, and yet I hear her as clearly as if she's standing right beside me, whispering my name. There's a gentleness to it, a kind of lullaby tone, but underneath is a sharp pull, like a hook set deep in my ribs. The grass is slick under my feet as I make my way down toward the water. The glow grows brighter the closer I get, turning the black surface into a sheet of silver-green light. And then I see them. The brothers. They stand at the edge of the marsh, their heads tilted in perfect unison, their faces still as blank and smooth as they were the first night I saw them. They don't move, but the air around them feels heavy, pressing against my shoulders and the back of my neck until my knees want to bend. The voice calls again, this time clearer, closer. I can almost make out the words. I step forward without meaning to, my toes sinking into the wet ground. The brothers take a step back toward the water, never looking away from me. They want me to follow. I tell myself to turn back, to run, but the thought slides away as quickly as it comes. My heart beats slow, too slow, like it's keeping time with something beneath the surface of the marsh. The glow pulses faintly, almost like it's breathing. My grandmother's voice lowers to a murmur, and the brothers begin to move into the water, their long limbs cutting through it without a sound. I take one more step forward, and the cold mud swallows my feet. The voice stops, and in the silence, something else begins to rise. The first step into the marsh steals the air from my lungs. The water is so cold it feels alive, biting into my skin as if it means to keep me. My breath clouds in the night air, and for a moment I can't move. Then I take another step, and the mud clutches at my feet, sucking me deeper with each motion. The glow on the surface is dim now, trembling like it might fade away completely. The brothers stand in the shallows ahead, their faces lit from below, eyes wide and unblinking. They don't speak. They don't need to. The pull in my chest drags me toward them. When I reach them, they move with me, gliding through the water as if they weigh nothing at all. Their hands touch my arms, my shoulders, light, slick touches that leave a trail of cold behind. They aren't guiding me so much as hemming me in, making sure there's only one way forward. The water climbs higher, lapping at my ribs. Every step stirs a smell from the depths, rot, iron, and something faintly sweet, like flowers that have been left to decay. My legs are numb, my heart hammering too hard. The brothers' hands linger a moment longer before sliding away into the black water. That Sep's when I feel it. Something huge is moving beneath us, slow at first, like it's testing the water, but then it rises, brushing against my calves with a force that makes me stumble. My foot searches for the bottom and finds nothing. The cold wraps higher, coiling up both legs now, heavy and unyielding. I try to pull free, but it tightens. Not rope, not plant life. This feels like muscle, smooth and strong, with a pulse that beats in time with my own. Panic swells in my throat. I try to call out, but the brothers are gone from my sides. I see them ahead now, watching silently as the surface closes between us. The grip yanks hard, and the water surges over my head. The world above vanishes in an instant. I open my eyes to darkness, thick as ink. Something moves closer, so close I can feel the slow exhale of it against my face. And in that breath, I understand, it isn't pulling me down to drown. It's pulling me home. The cold presses in from every side, and the water feels endless. I'm suspended in it, weightless yet trapped, my lungs aching for air. Then the darkness shifts, and shapes begin to form, not in front of me, but all around, as if the water itself is holding memories. I see faces first. My father, younger than I ever knew him, standing knee-deep in this same marsh. His hands tremble as he lowers something into the water, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. The image blurs, and then it's my grandmother, her face streaked with tears, holding a jar of something thick and red. She whispers words I can't make out before letting the jar slip beneath the surface. More faces appear, each one belonging to someone from my bloodline, stretching back further than I thought possible. They all stand in this same place, all giving something up to the black water. And always, just beyond them, the brothers are there unchanged, unaging, watching with those hollow, hungry eyes. The visions tighten around me, moving faster now. I see hands covered in soil, dragging up roots slick with slime. I see a woman's face split with grief as she slices her own palm, letting the blood fall freely into the mire. I see a man collapse on the bank, lifeless, while the brothers close in, their mouths opening just enough to drink. The truth rises like a voice in my head, though it doesn't sound like mine. The brothers aren't the last link in this curse. They're the first, the root. Everything we've given has only been to keep them alive, to feed whatever they serve beneath this water. A shadow moves under me, massive, slow, and patient. I feel the pull, again, gentle now, coaxing me deeper. My chest burns, but I can't move. My mind flickers between the past and the black void ahead, knowing they are the same thing. I realize then that my family was never cursed by the mire. We were bound to it by choice, made into its keepers long before I was born. The offerings weren't to break the chain, they were to keep it strong. And now it's my turn to give. The water grows warmer around me, and I feel something wrap my hand, pressing it toward my chest. The darkness hums, low and steady, as if it's been waiting centuries for this moment. The brothers smile without smiling, and I finally understand. This was never about survival, it was about belonging. It speaks without sound, yet I hear it clearer than my own thoughts. A voice rising from the dark below, ancient and patient, curling through the water and me. It tells me I can leave this place. It tells me I can breathe again. All I have to do is bring it a firstborn, fresh and new within the year. The words coil inside my skull, heavy as stone. I can't move. My lungs are knives now, stabbing deeper with every second I hold on. I want to scream that I'm not a killer, that I'd never do such a thing. But the marsh doesn't care about what I want. My mouth won't open. My body is no longer mine. The brothers float in a loose circle around me, their pale faces still, their thin lips sealed. Only their eyes move, those faintly glowing eyes fixed on me with something close to expectation. They aren't urging me to agree. They aren't warning me to refuse. They're just waiting, like they already know which way this will go. The voice comes again, lower now, each word like the thud of a heartbeat I can feel in my teeth. It says the bargain is old. It says my family has always known the terms, and it says if I refuse, my bloodline will end here, in the cold silence of the mire, just as so many before me have ended. I feel the shadow beneath me shift, pressing upward until the water warms against my skin. It's almost comforting, almost like it's pulling me closer in kindness. The warmth sinks deep into my bones, but it doesn't hide the truth. Whatever is down here, it doesn't want me to live for my sake. It wants me to be useful. I try to picture a way out, but my vision is blurring at the edges. My chest is on fire. I know I'm only moments from letting go, from inhaling the black water and sinking into it forever. The brothers drift closer, their faces so near I could touch them if I could lift my arms. One tilts his head, slow and deliberate, as if to say this is how it's always been. The voice asks one last time, "Bring the child, or stay." Somewhere far above, the moon waits behind clouds, and I know the surface is too far now. My choice, it seems, has already been made. The warmth turns to a grip around my wrist, and I feel myself being pulled upward. Cold mud clings to my skin when I open my eyes. The sky above me is the color of wet ash, and every breath I drag in feels like broken glass scraping down my throat. I'm lying on the edge of the marsh, half in the water, half on the bank, shivering so hard my teeth ache. The brothers are gone. No ripples, no faint glow, no trace they were ever there. The surface of the mire is smooth and dark, reflecting the sickly grey light, like an unblinking eye. For a moment I think, maybe I imagined all of it, that the voice, the bargain, the cold grip dragging me upward were just some drowning dream, but the ache in my lungs tells me it was real. Movement stirs in the tree line. Figures begin to emerge, cautious and slow, their shapes solidifying into the townsfolk. Faces I know, faces I've grown up with, all drawn tight and pale. They've been hiding, watching, waiting for a sign it was over. When they see me breathing, standing, they seem to believe it is. Some even smile, thin and brittle smiles that don't touch their eyes. I can't tell them the truth. Not here, not now. They'll cling to the lie that the danger has passed because it's easier than knowing what still waits beneath that black water. And I can't shake the feeling that if I speak the truth out loud, the thing below will hear me. They start to gather closer, offering blankets, whispering prayers. Their voices are hushed, as if the marsh is still listening. I take the blanket, but the warmth doesn't reach me. My gaze keeps drifting back to the water. It's too still, too quiet. Somewhere deep inside, I feel it, like a faint vibration under the earth, a slow and patient stirring. The brothers didn't vanish. They went back to where they belong, back to wait. The townsfolk think this is the end. I know it's the beginning. The voice didn't just let me go. It sent me back with a task, a weight in my chest heavier than the mud on my clothes. The wind shifts, carrying the faint smell of rot from the water. I see a single ripple break the surface, then fade as if it had never been there. The people around me keep talking, their relief spilling into the cold air, but I keep my eyes on the mire, because I swear in that dark reflection I see 3 faint glows looking back at me. The first night was the worst. I lay in bed, every muscle aching, every breath slow and heavy. The town slept easy, but I couldn't. The marsh was too quiet. No frogs, no insects, not even the faint lap of water against the shore, just stillness, stretching long into the dark. By the second night, the quiet had a weight to it, pressing on my chest. I told myself the brothers were gone, that whatever bound them to this place had broken, but in the small hours when the wind slipped through the cracks of my window, I could swear I heard something else beneath it. Not a voice exactly, more like the memory of one. Days passed, and still there was nothing. No glowing eyes, no strange shapes moving through the reeds, yet the house felt different. The walls groaned softly after sunset, the floorboards shifted underfoot when no one walked on them. At first I blamed it on the wood drying after the summer rains, but sometimes the creaks had a rhythm to them, like footsteps too slow to belong to the living. I started noticing the marsh again, even when I tried not to look. It seemed darker now, even in daylight. Some mornings a thin mist curled from its surface and drifted toward town, clinging low to the ground until it faded in the sun. Once I thought I saw the water ripple, though there was no wind. The silence wasn't peace. I knew it. It was the hush before something breaks. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for a signal I couldn't hear. The others didn't see it. They went back to their lives, repairing nets, mending roofs, lighting candles in the chapel, as though faith alone could hold the marsh back. But when I walked the shoreline, I could feel it watching me. Not the way a person does, but the way the earth might sense a storm before it comes. Last night, just before dawn, I woke to the sound of the house breathing. Not groaning, not settling. Breathing, slow, steady, deep. I lay still, counting the beats between each exhale. The air smelled faintly of the mire, damp and sweet with rot. When I dared to look toward the window, I saw only darkness. But deep inside it, I thought I caught a faint shimmer, not bright enough to be eyes. Not yet. It was just after sunrise when I saw it. The light coming through my window was pale and thin, and I was still half asleep, moving slow. I reached for my coat hanging on the wall, and that's when I noticed it. A handprint. Small, too small for any grown man. At first I thought it was dirt, maybe mud tracked in from the marsh. But when I touched it, I felt it immediately. Wet. Not sticky. Not fresh blood. Just cold. Unnaturally cold. My fingers tingled where they met it, as if the chill sank straight into the bone. I pulled my hand back fast, heart pounding. I don't know why, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. The shape was perfect. Every tiny finger pressed flat. It was low on the wall, like a child had placed it there while standing right beside my bed. There were no children in the house, no visitors, and the door had been locked all night. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring, feeling that strange weight I'd been carrying for days shift deeper. It was as if the marsh had left me a message, and I understood it without a single word. The curse was still here, waiting, watching. All morning, the air in the room felt different, heavier, damp, with a faint scent of moss and stagnant water. I kept glancing at the walls, at the corners, expecting to see more of those prints appear. None did, just the one. But it was enough. I remembered the voice I'd heard beneath the water, the bargain I never answered. I thought silence might save me. Now I realize silence only gives it time. The brothers might be gone, but something remains. It's patient. It doesn't need to rush. It knows the bloodline will stretch on, and sooner or later, it will claim its due. I didn't tell anyone in town. What would I say? That the marsh had reached into my home and touched my walls with the hand of something that shouldn't exist. They wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they might believe me and stay away, leaving me to face it alone. By nightfall, the print had dried. It left behind a faint pale outline, almost invisible, unless you knew where to look. I wish I could say I scraped it away, but I didn't because part of me knows it's not done, leaving marks. The candle burns low, throwing long, shaky shadows across the desk. My hand aches from writing, but I can't stop until the page is full. The paper smells faintly of damp wood and age, and the ink bleeds a little into the fibers, just like hers did. My grandmother's handwriting still lingers on the earlier pages, slanted, deliberate, heavy with the weight of things she could never speak aloud. I've read every word she left, more times than I care to admit. The warnings, the details she tried to keep vague but couldn't help letting slip, the fear between the lines. I used to think she was writing out of superstition, a woman clinging to old tales. Now I know she was just trying to save whoever came next. And now it subs me. The house is too quiet tonight. Even the marsh has gone still, as if it's holding its breath, listening to the scratch of my pen. I keep glancing toward the door, half expecting it to open on its own. The air feels heavy, pressing against my skin. There's a faint smell too, moss and something metallic, like wet iron. It's seeping in from somewhere I can't see. My hand trembles as I write the final lines. I don't try to soften the truth. Whoever finds this needs to understand exactly what they're stepping into. The curse doesn't die. It waits. It's patient, and it knows your name long before you know it. The last sentence barely fits at the bottom of the page. My grandmother ended hers with a plea. I end mine with a warning. Maybe it's the same thing. I close the journal slowly, feeling the weight of it, like all those words have soaked up something that doesn't want to let go. The leather is cool under my fingertips, and I can almost imagine her hands holding it the same way, all those years ago. The locked chest sits at the foot of the bed. The key is hidden where only someone who's truly looking will find it. I place the journal inside and close the lid. The lock clicks shut with a sound that feels final. I sit there in the candlelight for a long time, staring at that chest, knowing I've done all I can. My part in this is over. Or maybe its set's just begun. Because even as I blow out the candle, I swear I hear it, soft, wet footsteps on the floorboards behind me coming closer.